What is the main thing that keeps people behind? What is the main thing that prevents improvement? What is the key motivator that keeps people in self-destruction? I'll tell you what it is. Fear. With fear, I mean the dread of harm. When you are a small child, adults can harm you. They shouldn't harm you, but they're able to harm you. So as a child, when an adult becomes angry or is about to lose it, you feel dread. And you should feel dread because there is physical danger. So you comply to prevent harm from befalling you. This is no different from someone who's politically correct just not to lose their jobs and become homeless. Fear is the motivator. Now, when you want to avoid something unpleasant because you want to avoid harm, that is not fear in itself, that's being practical. But the moment there's an actual threat against your well-being and you act to reduce that threat, then your main focus is to get away from trouble. You are in a survival mode. So fear is now your motivation and therefore also your motivator. And fear is a demonic thing. Fear is powered by the spirit of fear, which are demonic entities. So when fear is your motivator, you are sponsored and backed up by evil spirits. Most people don't realize that fear is what keeps this world going. Fear is what keeps society in existence because society is a fear construct that people enact out of fear of being attacked. Most people don't realize how big the role of fear is in their daily life. They don't. They really don't because that's all they know. Let me tell you, believer, we have been freed from the spirit of fear. Instead of the spirit of fear, we have power, love, and a sound mind. Let me repeat that. Power, love, and a sound mind. We have those three things, which are far superior than the spirit of fear. So if you have love, power, and a sound mind, or you can say power, love, and a sound mind, whatever order you prefer, when we have those three things, the spirit of fear has no hold on us anymore. And don't you know that when the spirit of fear has no hold on you anymore, that violence will lose its grip on you? Violence is a tool to cause people to be fearful. Nobody wants to be harmed. Nobody wants to go through tragedy. Because when you're harmed, or when harm befalls you, you go through tragedy. Everyone wants to avoid tragedy. So you don't want harm to befall you. And because human beings are able to harm you when they're upset, you want to avoid their wrath. You want to avoid their disappointment. That's why people become people pleasers. Because they can't deal with others in a constructive way. You can say no to someone in a constructive way and remain at peace with them, with no resentment attached to anyone's side. But if you don't know how to live in a constructive way with others, or if you're with people who don't want to be constructive, then sooner or later, blackmail will enter the relationship. Because those people rely on the spirit of fear for their security. Because they have no leverage over all life circumstances, they submit to what's most frightening in the hope that what's most frightening will protect them. So they're surrendering to the perpetrator, in this case Satan, in the hope that Satan will have compassion on them. And once they receive the quote-unquote compassion of Satan, now they will attack anyone that hinders Satan's expectations. That's how those people are. Fear is what keeps society going. Not the fact that people need money at the end of the month to purchase food and to pay rent. What keeps society going is fear. People are frightened of the idea that things can be different. Because when things are different, then anything can happen. And anything also includes retaliation by those who are upset. So people are afraid of change, especially change for the better. Yes, they are afraid. When you walk by faith, you will realize and see how afraid worldly people are. Yes, they are afraid. And here's the thing. When that fear overtakes them and they can't handle it anymore, they escalate. They'll explode. And in this state of explosion, they'll commit massacres, they'll commit sexual violence on defenseless people like children or elderly, or they will pick up a gun and shoot down or gun down many people around them, or they may pick a knife and begin to stab people. When fear overtakes someone and the threat is so big that they can't bear it anymore, they escalate. So fear is never, under any circumstance, a good motivation. Any parent out there who thinks that fear is a good motivator for their children, they are assisting evil spirits. They're conditioning their children to become assets of demons. Anyone out there who thinks fear is a good motivation or a good motivator, you, without you being aware of it, without intending it, you've become a sponsor of Satan. That's what you've become. Nobody in their right mind, I don't care what the circumstance is, nobody in their right mind would want people to be obedient and fearful. Obedience must be based on practical reality. If you have a small child, they don't have brains to do anything on their own. They need a parental figure, and based on this reality, you can expect the child to obey, and obedience must be tied to the behavior of the parent. So the parent must be honorable, so the obedience of the child towards the parent is conditioned on the honorability, or the honorable attitude of the parents. The moment the parent is abusive or dangerous, the child must be removed from the parent, and the community must do this. So obedience amongst human beings is never unconditional. But in many religions, or better in the world in general, you are told that obedience to parents as well as to authority figures should be unconditional. Don't you know that even God himself, the Lord, the man, doesn't demand unconditional obedience? Even he gives us a covenant to give us security. And based on that covenant, we submit unto him. Even though he's God himself and we owe him obedience, naturally, he wants us to obey him out of trust. Not out of blind fright. Because that's what worldly people do. They have blind fright. Not blind faith, because they have no faith at all. They have blind fright. They don't know why they don't like someone. They just don't like someone because somewhere, some frustration inside of them is triggered. And they can't bear looking within. So they project on the outside. That's why worldly people love to make enemies. Because when you have enemies, you have someone to put the negative attention on, so that you don't have to look at yourself. Worldly people have blind fright. And blind fright is demonic. It's not from God. God will not support anything heading towards the direction of blind fright. Blind fright is the condition demons want us in. Fear is never a good motivator. And here's the thing, there is no such thing as a fear that comes from God. When you read the Old Testament, it talks about the fear of the Lord, that's an expression that the ancient Hebrews used. It's a linguistical expression, but it doesn't mean that that expression is true. It's an expression that refers to how they related to God. But we should relate to God based on our confident expectation of good that he gives us. So the word fear should not even be involved in it. God has not given us the spirit of fear. Fear is demonic. And that's the only thing that keeps society going. It's the only thing that keeps most of the wedlocks going. By the way, wedlock and marriage are two different things. I already explained that. I'm not going into that in this video. Most of the wedlocks out there are only there because of fear. Because if fear would go, they would break the wedlock and enter into a real marriage, as God intended. Most sexual relationships as well as sexual contact out there are based on seeking relief from blind fright. So even the sexual relationships in the world are fear-based most of the time. So how can you be happy on the long term with someone that you're with motivated by fear? How is that possible? It's not possible. Look, I don't want to make this video too long. Just understand, believer, God wants us free from blind fright. Many people out there, they have blind fright. It's only because that blind fright isn't triggered that they don't escalate, that they don't explode. And when they explode, it doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that they couldn't bear it anymore. It became too much on them. That's why debt collectors or bailiffs are not allowed to harass you too long with letters and with messages. If they claim you owe a debt that you need to pay and they keep harassing you, after a while the judge will tell them stop harassing him or anymore. Why? Because the authorities of the world know if you harass someone mentally way too much, there comes a point that they explode and everyone around will feel the harm. So debt collectors or bailiffs are not allowed to harass you way too long. If they keep harassing you, the government himself will come after them and destroy them. That's why if you committed shoplifting, for example, after some months, in some cases some years, they can't prosecute you anymore. You know why? Because if you have in your head that people can get to you or do something to you for something you did 5 or 10 years ago, that fright will haunt you, and eventually you'll take out that fright on those around you. And if you have children, you will harm your children because of the fright that haunts you. So even the legal systems of this world know that you shouldn't haunt people with threats way too long, because it will get out of hand. That's why the legal systems of this world are in a ritual manner, to relieve the population. I'm telling you, God wants you free from the spirit of fear, so walk by faith.